Right, welcome to the Joint Waste Collection Services Committee for the 26th of June 2025. Item 1, as it's the first meeting of the municipal year, the new municipal year, is the election of chair and vice chair. So do I have any nominations for chair, please?
I'd like to nominate Ashley Tilling, Councillor Ashley Tilling as chair.
Committee, do we agree with that? That's agreed. I'll hand over to you then, Councillor Tilling, to elect the vice chair.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. I'd like to nominate Rosemary as vice chair. Do we all agree with that? Yep, nods of heads. Are you happy to do that, Rosemary? Yep, okay, good.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Okay, item number 2, apologies for absence. I know we've got Ellen Nicholson is absent, but we've got Rob Leach has joined us. And I know that you mentioned Kim Tagliarini is absent from Elmbridge. Anybody else, Jenny?
I've had apologies from Paul Springford and George Pargeter from Amy as well.
Okay. But we do have Ian, don't we, from Ian George? Yes, yeah, Ian is here from Amy. Good, thanks very much. Okay, item number 3. Minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. We need to confirm those as a correct record of the meeting, which was held on the 27th of March. And then because we had one member absent on the 27th, we reconvened to look at the budget papers on the 9th of April. Are there any amendments or corrections to be made to those minutes? No? Okay, thank you. So we'll accept those as a true and accurate record of those meetings. Number 4, declarations of interests. If any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests in respect of any matters to be considered, then they should speak now. No. Okay, right. On to the main business. Item number 5. So the quarterly performance report. Is that going to be you, Nick?
It is supposed to be Nick, but he's not made it back into the meeting yet. Unfortunately.
Oh no, he dropped out, didn't he?
Yeah, he was having some problems. Yeah, let me quickly see if I can get to where I need to get to. Oh, there are some slides for this, so I'm going to see if I can at least get them loaded. Apologies for the delay. Right, I have the slides, so bear with me. I'm going to do my best Nick impression. I might ask Kelly to hop in if she's got any comments because she presented this information to the board, and hopefully between us we can make this work. Right, hopefully I am sharing the slideshow version of those. Can you see that?
Yes, that's good, thanks.
Okay, super. So in the agenda pack, you've got the paper which gives an update on recycling, residual waste and operational performance of quarter 4 of 24-25 under the joint collection contract. And the slides today are going to summarise a number of areas on this. She says. There we go. So before we look at the joint contract authority performance in terms of recycling residual waste volumes, it's important that we can also look at the Surrey-wide curbside trends for the year to March 25 compared to the previous year. So you can see here that dry mix recycling DMR is down 2.5% Surrey-wide. Food waste is stable. Garden waste is down by 2%, and residual waste is up by 0.7%. The trends across the joint contract authorities broadly align with the Surrey-wide patterns. So DMR fell in all areas. In Elmbridge down 2.5%, in Moll Valley 1.8%, Surrey Heath down by 3%, and Woking 4.1%. Food waste was varied, with Elmbridge up by 3%, but the other areas all dropping slightly. Garden waste declined in Elmbridge the most significantly by 7.9%, with Woking down by 5.2%, Moll Valley 0.5%, but it did rise in Surrey Heath by 5.8%. And residual waste rose slightly in Elmbridge by 0.6%, Surrey Heath by 1.1%, Woking 1%, but with a large increase in Moll Valley of 5.3%.
Joe, Nick has managed to get in now, so I don't know if you want to hand over.
Happy to, Nick, if you're here. Do you want to crack on?
Yes, I can do, Joe.
Do you want me to keep sharing the slides and
yeah, if you wouldn't mind, and then
no, that's fine.
yes.
Just tell me when to click on.
Okay, apologies, had major IT issues this morning, so yeah, just sorry, I'm just catching up to the slide that you're currently on. You're on slide 3, is that correct, Joe?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, great. Okay, yes, apologies everyone. So yes, this looks at the last quarter 24-25 compared to the quarter 4 23-24. So yes, as of this latest quarter, and it shows obviously the 12-month as well. So, but looking at the latest quarter first, Surrey Heath had the highest estimated recycling rate at 58.1%, followed by Moll Valley at 51.9%. Elmbridge was on 49.6% and Woking 48.8%. Across Surrey, including CRC waste, it was 49.4%. So all were above this, apart from Woking, as you can see. On a 12-month rolling basis, so that's to March 2025 to the previous year, Surrey Heath had the highest recycling rates at 59.1%, followed by Moll Valley at 55.4%, Woking at 54.1%, and Elmbridge at 53.6%. All were above the Surrey-wide rate of 53.5%, which also, again, includes CRC waste. However, all 4 areas saw a decline compared to 23-24. Okay, next slide, please, Joe. Thank you. This now looks at, as I said previously, quarter 4 24-25 compared to quarter 4 23-24. So DMR tonnage fell by between 80 to 220 tonnes in each joint contract authority area from Q4 23-24 to Q4 24-25, and that's consistent with the overall trend for 24-25. Next slide, please, Joe. So food waste trends were mixed, although Elmbridge saw an overall increase in percentage terms in 24-25. Tonnage fell slightly by 10 tonnes in Q4 24-25 compared to Q4 23-24. Moll Valley and Surrey Heath reported decreases of 40 and 20 tonnes respectively in Q4, consistent with their overall downward trend for the year. In contrast, Woking recorded a 20-tonne increase in Q4, despite an overall decrease in percentage terms across 24-25. Next slide, please, Joe. Garden waste results were also mixed, with Q4 24-25 figures reflecting the overall trends for the year. Compared to Q4 23-24, tonnage fell by 230 tonnes in Elmbridge, 140 tonnes in Moll Valley, and 150 tonnes in Woking. In contrast, Surrey Heath recorded an increase of around 500 tonnes. Next slide, please, Joe. Thank you. So residual waste results were mixed, although the overall trend for 24-25 was an increase in residual waste. Q4 24-25 saw decreases in Elmbridge around 30 tonnes and Woking around 100 tonnes compared to Q4 23-24. In contrast, Mole Valley and Surrey Heath recorded increases of 240 and 20 tonnes respectively, and that aligns more closely with the overall annual trend. Next slide, please, Joe. Okay, so now we're moving on to the AME contract KPI performance information. So looking at Elmbridge first, that showed an improvement in several key performance areas in Q4 compared to the previous quarter. Missed collections KPI 1, missed assist collections KPI 2, and missed collections not rectified within the SLA KPI 3 all decreased compared to Q3. However, repeat missed collections KPI 4 worsened, and that peaked in March. Performance remained stable in repeat missed assisted collections KPI 5 with very low reported incidence of spillage KPI 6 and waste separation failure KPI 7. Failures to carry out collections showed mixed results, a slight rise for assisted KPI 8 and improvement for non-assisted KPI 9. There were no incidents to report for KPI 10, missed bulky collections, street cleaning KPI 11, and fly tipping, fly posting, graffiti removal KPI 12 both worsened. Litter survey results KPI 15A improved and consistently met targets, while detritus levels KPI 15B improved slightly but remained above target. Next slide, please, Joe, for Mole Valley. So Mole Valley saw notable improvements in Q4, particularly in missed collections KPI 1 and missed assisted collections KPI 2, both showing significant drops from Q3. Missed collections not rectified within the SLA KPI 3 also improved but remained high overall. Repeat missed collections KPIs 4 and 5 improved on average but spiked sharply in March. Spillage KPI 6 and waste separation failures KPI 7 were minimal. Collection failures KPIs 8 and 9 remained stable or rose slightly. There were no incidents to report for KPI 10, missed bulky collection. However, street cleaning KPI 11 and fly tipping, graffiti removal KPI 12 worsened. Litter survey results KPI 15A declined in Q4 but still met the target, while detritus levels KPI 15B improved significantly in Q4 but remained above target with a performance of 9.2%. Okay, moving on, Joe, if you wouldn't mind, to the next slide, Surrey Heath. So Surrey Heath continued to perform strongly across most KPIs in Q4. Missed collections and missed assisted collections KPIs 1 and 2 improved, while no missed collections remained unresolved KPI 3. Repeat missed collections KPIs 4 and 5 stayed very low with only slight increases. Spillage KPI 6 and waste separation failures KPI 7 were minimal or non-existent. Collection failures KPIs 8 and 9 remained low and stable. There were no incidents to report for KPI 10 and no street cleaning or fly tipping related failures KPIs 11 and 12. For KPI 13, Surrey Heath's data is included within Woking's figures, as we're currently unable to separate call data by area. Litter levels KPI 15A rose slightly but stayed well within target, and detritus levels KPI 15B improved significantly, meeting the target in Q4. And last but not least, Woking, if you wouldn't mind, next slide, please, Joe. Woking maintained steady performance across most KPIs in Q4. Missed collections KPI 1 and missed assisted collections KPI 2 remained stable, while missed collections not rectified within SLA KPI 3 and repeat missed collections KPI 4 both saw slight improvements. Repeat missed assisted collections KPI 5 stayed low with a minor increase. No issues were reported for spillage or waste separation failures KPI 6 and 7. Failures to carry out collections, both assisted and non-assisted KPIs 8 and 9 improved compared to Q3. There were no incidents to report for KPI 10, missed bulky collection, and KPI 13, customer contact service response times not reported within the SLA. Yeah, there was no incidents there. So that's all we wanted to sort of present to you today in terms of performance on recycling, residual waste, and obviously contract performance operationally. Happy to sort of pass back to the chair now and take any questions that the committee may have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Nick. Yeah, I'm sure we've all questions about our own patches. If I just kick off with a general question or two general questions based on the earlier data you presented before you delved into each of the different boroughs and districts.
Yeah.
Interesting that Surrey Heath recycling rate is 58%, whereas in the last quarter, Elmbridge, Mole Valley, Woking was round about 50%. So quite a significant difference. And that was reflected across the year as well, that Surrey Heath is much higher, 59.9%, whereas ours are about 53%. Do we know, have we done any analysis of why Surrey Heath are able to recycle much more than the other boroughs and districts? Because that's quite important, isn't it, as we go through to the new contract to try and indeed as we get into the EPR payments, try and understand why there is that difference and whether we can close the gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, historically, Surrey Heath has had a sort of higher sort of recycling rate compared to the others. We are looking more at sort of performance than we ever have to sort of analyse data and work out where we're perhaps not sort of reaching particular sort of targets and where there might be more that we can do for a particular sort of material stream. So that will sort of continue to be sort of a focus area for us. Obviously, the sort of picture that we've seen generally, though, and which even though Surrey Heath is obviously higher and the others are slightly lower, obviously we have seen sort of a decline in dry mix recycling performance and an increase in residual waste, which is kind of like the sort of part of the sort of wider trend seen across Surrey and nationally. So yes, obviously an area that we continue to target with obviously simpler recycling, obviously in mind to see what else can be done for the other areas to sort of boost it. I'm going to bring in sort of Joe, if you want to add any more words from I guess an operational sort of perspective.
Yeah, I just thought I would add, I mean, I think we've sort of touched on this when we've talked about it before, that there is a slightly different mix of dry mix recycling that can be collected in Surrey Heath. So there are a few sort of different material types because their material goes to a different facility, which obviously helps divert some of that from the refuse bin. And in Surrey Heath, the capacity of the refuse bins is also smaller. The standard size is smaller than in the other areas. So that's a contributing factor too. A reduced capacity is going to encourage people to kind of be more focused on what's going in the right bin if they're going to, be under pressure if they are putting it all in the residual bin when it doesn't need to go there. I think for Q4 as well, what's worth mentioning too is it was Surrey Heath that had that sort of not bucking the trend on the garden waste in Q4, and it had an increase whereas the others went down. That's not unusual in Q4 that garden waste tonnages aren't high, but part of what was driving that garden waste tonnage, not all of it necessarily, was that there was a different approach to dealing with Christmas trees in Surrey Heath this winter. So after Christmas, Amy were involved in picking some of those up, which will have meant that got recorded as green waste too, which is also contributing to particularly the Q4 difference in performance, I think, just as another factor. So there's a lot of things that come into play, but you can see that the quarter trends can be very different to the annual trend as well. So it's trying to dive into all the different contributing areas. So hopefully that adds some more context.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think there are some useful lessons there as we go forward to the new contract. Christmas tree collections, maybe that should be more common across the 4 areas or the 4 depots. And it's just that there's that 8% difference is quite stark. So maybe we do need to, as we go forward, work a bit more closely with the MRVs, the collection points, to try and understand so that we can recycle more items, which clearly seems to happen in Surrey Heath more than the other areas. So getting on to individual districts and boroughs, if I lead off with Elmbridge, as that was the first presented, KP11 street cleaning performance failure is down again. So I'm just trying to get that up on my screen. Yeah, so it worsened in Q4, rising to an average of 102 per month from 90 in Q3. The street cleaning performance failure then is how is that? What exactly are you measuring on that? Is it the number of journeys made by the street cleaning team, and how often they can't go out because they've got some sort of failure? What exactly is being measured?
That's a measure of whether a street cleaning job, so where something has fallen below standard, is completed within the SLA that's assigned to that particular area. So the response times will vary bless you, across the district or the borough, because high footfall areas will have a faster response time expected to restore them to standard if they fall below, whereas residential or rural areas might have a longer response time for Amy to return and resolve that. So these are street cleaning issues that have been dealt with, but not dealt with in the timescales that the contract assigns to them.
Right. Okay. Thanks. So that probably has a bit of a link to the KP15B, which is the detritus, which again hasn't met the KPI performance figure. And I think that again a little bit disturbing. We keep talking about street cleaning and how it's such a visible aspect of how the contract is running to all residents. And if we don't get that right, then my inbox tends to be pretty full of people complaining about streets not being properly cleaned. So it is an area we'll obviously come to that with Ian a bit later on, that it's an area that needs to be improved. Which is a comment rather than a question. So I'll now move on to Rosemary, who had her hand up first.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for your first question, which was also an interest of mine and one I've asked about before, because I think you're right, we need to learn from Surrey Heath and what they're doing right. Yes, so coming to Mole Valley now, it wasn't a surprise that our figures look bad comparatively, but when I went through the KPIs, if I'm not mistaken, I think 1, 3, 4, 5, 15B all failed to meet the target. So I assume there's financial penalty for those, but I very much hope to see significant improvements in those, because this is issues with the depot that we know there have been, and although it's improving, there are still weeks when we're seeing misses. So it just make us look like poor relations in terms of operation. I don't want to say any more because I sounded off about this before.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Rosemary. And obviously Ian could comment on that a little bit later on. And Morgan.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, it's always good to see Surrey Heath doing well in terms of recycling, and I agree. I think we need to try to find ways for the other three to improve their recycling. It's always I don't think that we do anything overly different in Surrey Heath. And I do think, as Joe said, maybe there was some kind of like hardware kind of implications. So like the size of the residual waste bin it could be, so that's definitely something we should be looking at into the contract, is having a more is the standard across the 4 boroughs, 4 areas the same. Just with regards to the Surrey Heath recycling rate, I was wondering if we've done any, is that just, and this is a question for Nick, is this just a rate of what is in our recycling bins which Amy collects, or is it the recycling of the entire? Are we doing an analysis of the recycling of the entire borough? Does that? So the question is really: has the closure of the Bagshot CRC had an effect on Surrey Heath's recycling rates? Because we have the two recycling centres now as just one, and there is it does look like there is a slight drop in the recycling rate in Surrey. I was wondering if that's had an impact. Is that an analysis we've done?
So yeah, I mean, this recycling rate is just looking at obviously curbside collected waste, so it's not looking more broadly, as you say, across the borough and obviously the recycling centres within the borough. We are actually looking at the sort of Bagshot sort of CRC closure now, both from, as you say, the perspective of seeing, you know, what sort of tonnage is going through that facility at the moment, but also we're being asked to look at fly tipping incidents as well, to sort of measure the sort of before and after effect to see if there is any sort of trend emerging there. But no, the recycling rate that's presented today doesn't include the CRC sort of tonnages within the borough. Sorry, yeah, did you want to come back, Morgan?
Yeah, it was just on on the fly tipping one. Do we, because do correct me if I'm wrong, because we
Yes.
report on missed fly tipping kind of no failures. Do we report on how many incidences are kind of reported?
Yeah, that is reported into waste data flow. It's a separate module of waste data flow that doesn't that responsibility doesn't actually sit within JWS. I think it's the environmental department within Surrey Heath, but we are liaising with them at the moment to sort of build up that picture. We get obviously a picture of the tonnages that are sort of collected in terms of fly tipping, because obviously they're taken to obviously the transfer stations for obviously onward sort of management. So yes, it is a picture that we're building up, Councillor Rise, but yeah, it's I think with just looking at Bagshot, it's probably just too soon to say what the effect of that is at the moment on both recycling and fly tipping levels. Is that okay? Thank you.
Okay, good, thank you. Rob and Mark, did you have any particular questions on the Woking stats?
No, I don't think we do. Actually, our concern is more with our people not recycling enough rather than the actual performance stats. So we'll pass on that one. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. A final question from me, which is probably for Joe. So the garden waste generally seems to be down. Was there any particular drop in the number of subscribers to the garden waste service that might account for that, for the year-on-year fall?
I don't believe I mean, the trends do go up and down over the year because people can join and leave the service at any point in the year in 3 of the areas. So in Surrey Heath, Mole Valley and Woking, the subscriptions are on a rolling 12-month basis, so people can sign up at any time. In Elmbridge, everyone signs up from the 1st of April, so they need to pay by the 31st of March. We do sometimes see a bit of fluctuation at the 6-month point, because there is a sort of 6-month price that kicks in October. So we might see some people join or increase their subscription at that point of the year as well, because the price change then incentivizes them to do it at that time of year. Broadly speaking, I think the garden waste customer numbers have been fairly consistent. We have there was an issue with renewals in Surrey Heath and Woking in the autumn, which saw an error in the way those renewal notifications were sent out by Amy to some of the customers in those 2 areas, meaning people didn't receive them. That was picked up, and those numbers have recovered after that was followed up with extra correspondence to those customers. So a little bit of a lull, but apart from that, I think the numbers do fluctuate month on month a little bit, but there's no significant ups and downs in those as a total. I think what we see generally, though, are the more seasonal effects and weather dependent effects, because although typically the peak of garden waste collections happens obviously spring and summer. If you have a very dry summer, it will not be that heavy in terms of tonnages collected. If you have a very wet summer and a very wet autumn, you know, the material that you're collecting in volume wise might be very similar, but weight wise, because it's wet, will be heavier. So it's not always easy to sort of distinguish exactly how those seasonal effects are impacting as well, but they will have an effect on the tonnages collected.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Just following on from that, it's not really necessarily for Nick, but I'm just reflecting that as we go forward to the new contract, 2 or 3 years ago, we did have a discussion about whether we should try and balance up the garden waste subscriptions so that all 4 areas have a similar level of garden waste subs. And I think we made a little bit of some inroads in that. I mean, clearly it was still up to each individual borough or district to decide on their own subs, and there are still some variations. As we go forward, are we going to try and unify those rates? As I suppose it will be up to each individual unitary authority, will it, to set those rates? So we might still have differences across our 4 boroughs and districts.
Yeah,
I'd make the same assumption. Sorry, Nick. I would make the same assumption that will continue to be a council decision, you know, a tier 1 decision, as we call them in our governance, that it sits with the individual authority. So whilst those individual authorities might change in size and shape and name in the future, that would still sit with those, whether it's 2 or 3 that cover the 4 contract areas in the future. But you know, as we go into that period of looking at fees and charges in the autumn with officers from the 4 councils, we always look to sort of compare and see where there can be consistency where possible. But as you say, it's within each individual authority's decision making to set those.
Yeah, we are doing a bit of work as part of the work programme to sort of look at subscription numbers, to look at them historically and see how they have sort of changed and evolved, and look at what authorities are maybe doing to, you know, in terms of their communications on how they promote, you know, obviously whether it's managed by the authority or Amy, what they're doing to obviously promote the service and how they're chasing renewals. So that is something that we're looking at the background. So if there is any sort of quick wins that can be made to sort of boost levels, then we would recommend those. But yeah, it is part of the work programme that we're looking at for this year.
And would we try and work towards a sort of unified system of renewals? So I know, yeah, as you said, Elmbridge, everybody has to renew by the 1st of April, but the other 3 areas are on a rolling basis. Would it not make sense for that to be a common system across all 4?
I think there's pros and cons to doing it both ways. It really, you know, is down to, in the case of Mole Valley and Elmbridge, because you administer that part of the service directly in-house. That's, you know, a decision that you can make. Currently, the contract specification requires Amy to take subscriptions on behalf of Surrey East and Woking on that 12-month rolling basis. So obviously, if that were, you know, a change that needed to be looked at, that's something we'd have to discuss in terms of a change to the specification, because, as I say, currently Amy are doing it as we've asked them to as part of the contract. But you know, I think, as I say, there's pros and cons to both. People often respond to signing up to that service in response to sort of the weather conditions, the peaks in gardening and things, and having a single point of sign up can maybe dampen that effect sometimes. If people think they've missed out, if they're paying the full year charge, they don't want to pay it partway through the year. Obviously there is a 6-month price in Elmbridge that kicks in, whereas otherwise you have the flexibility to sort of join as soon as it becomes sort of a useful tool to have at your disposal, a garden waste bin at your property. So it also puts different pressures on contact centres and communication channels as well. So you know, there's pros and cons, and I suppose it's something that could be discussed if we thought it would have a significant impact in the 2 areas where Amy administers it, but I don't think there's been any sort of drive to do that to date.
Yeah. I mean, because what will happen is our individual communication centres will no longer be in place, will they, in 2 years' time? So it will be a more centralised system anyway.
Probably interesting.
More. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I was just going to add on the point about garden waste tonnage as well, that we do already, if you include sort of what residents take to CRCs as well, we do already have quite a very sort of high capture rate of garden waste tonnages. So there is, when you look at like a residual bin and the composition analysis of that from sampling, you actually see that a very, very small percentage of that is garden waste. So there's not a lot to actually bring in. So from subscriptions, all you may do is, obviously, if you're looking at it from a tonnage perspective, is you might be taking it away from the CRC and obviously putting it through the sort of curbside. So that's just a point to sort of bear in mind when you're thinking about obviously growing sort of recycling rate percentages.
Yeah. Okay, Morgan.
Thank you. Just on the garden waste subscriptions, is there much difference between the 4 contract areas now? Because I think, because we did make the decision of trying to come together as much as possible, and I think there's not much difference between each area. Am I correct? So like I was, I've just thrown something at you, Joe, haven't I? So it doesn't have, you don't have to answer now, but it is just maybe because I know what, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we made a kind of a concerted effort to try to come together. Have we continued to do that? And has a variant started to crop in again? I think it should always be on maybe on a year-on-year basis that we always, I'm sure officers do this already, but it's just making sure that we're not drifting.
You're going to test my knowledge, and I'm not going to answer exactly on whether everyone's raised the same, because I genuinely can't remember off the top of my head. I'm happy to pop something around separately by email after the meeting, just showing what the different fees and charges are in the 4 areas. There, I think subscription sort of service charge wise, I think there is, it's not a significant difference between each of the 4, and it has gotten closer. But there are some areas where there are container charges, for example, that apply. So that would probably be the most significant difference. But I'll send something around by email afterwards that shows what they are.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks, Joe. In fact, I'm just thinking under the simpler recycling,
Yes.
Isn't there a requirement to collect garden waste for free rather than a subscription service, or was that taken out?
Yeah, that was one of the proposals that was floated by DEFRA at the time, but no, they've left that at the discretion of the local authority.
Right. Okay. So under the new contract, we'll definitely still have a subscription service.
I would believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. No other questions for Nick. Thanks very much, Nick.
Yeah, sorry about the ICT problems. Thank you.
We all suffer occasionally.
Yeah.
Item number 6. So Amy, annual report on improvement plan. So Ian, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I will share my screen. I'm not going to go through the report page by page. I'll just pick out some stuff because it is a bit of a beast of a report, so which I'm sure you've all divulged and had a look at. So I'll start with health and safety, and a lot of what I comment about personally will be only from sort of August of last year when I joined, so I can't really comment on what happened prior to that, although I know some of the reasons behind. So health and safety last year, there was no RIDDORs, which is really good, and minimal lost time injuries in terms of where we stood as a contract. So it's good. We don't want to injure anybody really, at all. So 1 is 1 too many in my eyes, but it's not a bad figure for the industry, should we say. That's quite pleasing. We've got a program at the moment ongoing of increasing our close calls across the whole of the 4 depots, which we have started to see, and we're getting better close calls through more information, and we pass on the ones we need to JWS, and then subsequently onto Surrey County Council when it's a overgrown area or pothole issue or something like that. So that's really good to see, and it's got a lot better from this month when we've started targeting. So I can't really comment on what the numbers are at the moment, so I haven't got them officially in terms of that. So as I say, just a couple of injuries. I suppose the most significant one that comes to mind was the gentleman that fell out of the cab at the landfill site, with the tipping facility, and also the guy that embedded glass in his hand when picking up a black bag, which was side waste, which we know he shouldn't have picked up, but he thought he was doing something good for the residents. So, you know, they're the significant ones we've had during my tenure. Just some of the headlines of last year. Obviously, a big change in senior management within Amy on the JWS contract, with myself coming in and subsequently people underneath me changing positions. New depot manager at Woking because Tracy got promoted to principal operations manager earlier this year. So change there. And what the other things we've done, we've actually structured each depot now has the same structure across the whole of the estate. So we have a depot manager, an assistant manager, 2 charge hands, plus administration on site, so that they mirror each other now, and that seems to be working for us. In terms of that, we'll move on to KPIs. If I just show you, would have seen them. So this is the yearly trend, and you can see I've got the 3 years in there, and this takes us up to March this year. A big spike in KPI penalties in December. The other spikes that you see in June, August, September, there are reasons behind that. So I can talk through them when I go through the individual depots. But the main one in December was our lads' failures in Mole Valley, which we looked at, and and there's a lot of reasons why I think it happened, and I think that we've grown to understand that there needs to be a consistency across the whole of the estate in terms of how lads is determined, and that's sort of taken in place sort of this time round. So June we're doing lads at the moment, and it seems to be more consistent. And from what I've seen so far, we've not had the results in yet, apart from one depot. So we're just waiting on that to finalise. So I think you'll see a significant decrease in lads' failures this month in terms of that. So each individual depot, Woking, the spike in Woking last August was all vehicle issues. They had this before, so it was literally as I came in, but they had a big upturn in the amount of vehicles they were able to deploy due to breakdowns. So that impacted in their ability to meet all their KPIs. So that's that, and you see once we've got that under control, Woking have been very consistent. There's not much criticism I can put with Woking in terms of their service. It's very consistent week in, week out. So one of the depots I'm really pleased with. Surrey Heath, very similar story. Their peak is exactly the same reason. Fleet availability was in June last year, before my time, but that's the knowledge I have on that. That one peak, and again, once it's under control, very consistent depot, as we all know, and we have this comment every time we have this meeting. So that's them. Mole Valley, a little bit up and down. Their peak December, all lads. The things in there. The service in terms of the actual service, frontline service, in terms of waste collected from residents, really good performance. The peaks have all been streets, a little bit on fleet availability as well earlier in last year. So in terms of Mole Valley streets, we looked at it as a whole, determined that they're actually understaffed on the street side. So we put extra resource into that, and I think I can honestly say, since we've done that, the streets have improved in terms of getting more or less the vehicles they require on a daily basis out. There has been some shortfalls on the odd days, which we address straight away. We know the reasons why. The depots have been informed, or depot has been informed. I need the reasons why they fall down on that. So I get that information and we try and deal with that as soon as possible. I will say Mole Valley is the depot that has impacted the most in terms of their failures on third-party issues that are out of our control as Amy. Long delays at tips at times, which, when you're spending across the whole patch hundreds of hours sitting in a queue waiting to tip, we're not going to be able to perform the service. So, in my opinion, that needs to be addressed with the county in terms of, limiting them delays in terms of that. And we are moving forward. We have communications with JWS, and then they pass that on to the county, and we get the answers. Sometimes small delays don't affect the service, but there are occasions when vehicles just sit in there, they can't get their work done in their day's work. So that's that. Elmbridge, lots of spikes in Elmbridge. I can't comment on 2023 because I don't know why. 2024, there is vehicle problems. September was definitely a vehicle problem in there. Elmbridge I can honestly say they're going through the same situation we had at Mole Valley at the moment. We're looking at their workforce. We've identified exactly the same, and they are short on their streets. That has also impacted on the graffiti side of the contract, and that's at both Elmbridge and Mole Valley, which is why we've got recently a high percentage of graffiti issues that haven't been dealt with. One was the vehicle age of what we had there. We've now got another vehicle and a brand new graffiti vehicle at Elmbridge. But what we also decided to do as a contract was keep the second vehicle and move that on to Mole Valley. So we now have 2 graffiti vehicles in the contract, and 2 operatives that are trained in doing that, plus extras when we've got sickness and absence. So the graffiti is being dealt with on a quicker basis now because we have 2 vehicles, so we can work on that a lot quicker there. So yeah, these are just a few more things. Container requests there. High amount of containers at each depot. The amount of containers we deliver or are requested by residents for various reasons. In my experience, these are very high numbers. So, and it may be new subscriptions on green waste, I accept, but a lot of them are damaged containers as well. So you can see there in Mole Valley, 1,755 containers in 1 month. They deliver their containers on 2 days a week. They are behind on container deliveries. So we are looking at that currently to see if that needs to be changed in the amount of days we deliver or what resource we have to deliver these containers on a weekly basis. In terms of, I'll move on to improvement plans. So there is a copy of last year's
Ian, before you do that, Emma puts her hand up. Do you want to come to a question now, Emma?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It was just going back to the Mole Valley kind of trends, and I think touched on sort of third-party delays. I just wanted to highlight, I think from my perspective, part of the challenges towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, was around higher than anticipated staff absences, and that had a direct impact on our ability to collect the bins over the kind of Christmas shutdown. I just wanted to, that is right, isn't it, Ian? Although you didn't sort of bring that out in the presentation just now, that was part of the December-January challenge, and it took a while to get that caught back up again.
In terms of service, in terms of the KPI at Mole Valley in December, the frontline service performed well. Most of the KPIs was the lads.
Yeah.
Failures.
And the January kind of challenges was kind of the need to catch up because of
was
stuff.
the first. It was the recovery between the literally the week between Christmas and New Year.
Okay,
So
thank you.
yeah.
That's just the point I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, but there was still significant delays at third party and more on that at that period. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. And Joe?
Yes, thank you. I was going to wait to the end, but we've stopped for another question. I thought I'd bring this in before Ian moves on to the improvement plan. When you were talking about the penalties for the litter and detritus surveys in Mole Valley, you referred to sort of a consistency issue in how those are being done, and I just wanted to understand the reference to that, because you know, it sort of implies a difference in the way the surveys are carried out in Mole Valley, which obviously isn't my view.
Well, I mean, it's very opinionated, Joe, in terms of that. So I look at some of the areas that are expected to be swept. I look at government guidelines on that as well. You know, we've had conversations before on this, Joe. What I look at in terms of, I can bring you one that's flagged up at the end in this month. Right, we're on a street. It's parked cars both sides of the road consistently. We can't sweep it, and we get penalised for it. You know, there's just no logic behind me why we should be penalised for that when we physically can't get down the road. And that was seen by people on site. That's the sort of things I can bring up. You know, a country lane with mud banks. How far into that mud bank do you want me to sweep? This is the sort of thing I'm looking at now, and you know, and I don't think personally that I know what the contract says. I appreciate what the contract says, but there's no logic behind what is expected on the LAD survey.
Well, you know, I'll reiterate the point just for sort of clarity then, that the staff in the two teams, East and West, are trained to the same extent. They've all undergone the Keep Wet and Tidy survey training. They apply the same gradings across the board, and our selection of transects is based on the old NI 195 methodology with adaptations for the slightly different format of the contract spec. When it comes to things like heavily parked roads, there are requirements within the specification to manage the street cleaning on those roads on the part of Amy, in terms of you know, undertaking special cleans where signs, cones, information leaflets might be provided to try and limit parking. You know, that doesn't need to be done every time, but if it's done on a frequency, we've seen in the past when it has been used that it can be really effective. So, you know, as we've said before, if there are specific transects where you have concerns that they've not been assessed fairly, then we're happy to have those shared. But you know, we haven't had any significant feedback on the December survey, which is why I just wanted to get a clarification on that. Thank you.
And I think, Ian, this has been brought up on several occasions at previous meetings, that it is a significant issue, the amount of detritus that stays in the streets where you've got parked cars. And I can appreciate it's a problem for your operatives, but the only really way of tackling that is by putting out some sort of notices or cones.
I totally agree, Councillor Tilling, and we've requested that. I'm not going to bring it up in this meeting because I don't think it's appropriate. I think it needs to be dealt with outside, but we have requested that, and we've had no feedback back from that.
Okay. Well, I know you can't put out. You know, the Surrey County Council won't issue temporary traffic regulation notices, but anyway, yeah, let's take it outside the meeting, because I think it's quite a significant issue, and that's probably one of the reasons why some of these LADS surveys are failing. Rosemary, did you want to follow up on that?
I think the point has been made on that. I just wanted to go back to the vehicle delays, and Ian, can you explain if Elmbridge are using the same facility, how is it that Mole Valley is impacted more than Elmbridge on that?
You're talking about the delay at the tip itself.
The delay at the tip, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't get any reports from Elmbridge. Do Elmbridge use the same facility?
I think so.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we both use Grundon's
Yeah.
in Randalls Road.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about Grundon's. The main is it's the Leatherhead Suez.
Elmbridge do tip at the sewer site at Leatherhead. They don't tip there every day of the week.
Yeah.
They've predominantly been using it probably Wednesdays and Fridays based on the area of the borough that they're in on those days. They may opt to deliver to that site, but they're not there every day of the week. But in terms of using the access road to get to Grundon's, yeah, Woking, Elmbridge and Mole Valley all use Grundon's.
Yep. So the majority of the delays are from, we don't get not many delays at Grundon's. It is predominantly from Suez.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. So that is being brought up then, Joe, with Surrey County Council.
Yes, absolutely. What we've tried to ensure is that there's a a process in place where if crews are experiencing delays, we need that fed back to the depot management team, because they can then pass that on to us. It's very helpful for us that they can use their Masternaut tracking to show sort of times that people have, drivers have been in queues, because they have some functionality with that software that they can sort of, measure how long someone's been on in a particular area. And then we share that with Surrey County Council, so because Suez are their contractor running those sites, so that they can have the conversations. And generally, we can't always get immediate feedback, but we do often get sort of feedback about what other vehicles were on site, if they were having to load something else, or whether their figures correspond with what Amy are reporting. But there are site user group meetings, and I think you attended one at Leatherhead only a couple of weeks ago, which was very positive, because things have been better than you had experienced at other points in the year. So we try and make sure that feedback opportunity is there to keep the communication going. And my team, the ops officers and managers will sometimes just make direct contact with the site managers if there's a concern, just to make sure that there's no operational issues that mean we should be trying to divert crews to other locations to try and avoid sitting in a queue, which is obviously another reason why we want the drivers to be communicating with the depot and one another, so that they can almost not even bother going if they think there is a delay, and divert to somewhere like Epsom if it's convenient on the day.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Morgan.
Thank you. That's almost a good opportunity if we had a representative from Surrey County Council at this meeting, as they are invited to respond to that point. And it's a shame that they don't attend. Would we be able to get an official response from Surrey County Council on this? Because it's clearly a concern that if the crews are being held up in queues, Surrey County Council needs to be able to provide a remedy to that, because it's their site and their contractor. So I would be keen if we can get something from I think he's still the interim strategic director at Surrey for waste, so we can have a response. Thank you.
I'll give Joe a break on this one, and I'll give Joe a break on this one and come in response. So Surrey County Council have actually withdrawn from the inter-authority agreement, so they no longer actually have a seat at this meeting, because they were here under that kind of governance arrangement. But that said, we can still reach out to the county council if you think it's appropriate to have a county council representative for certain agenda items. Then we could always look into doing that. But generally now, given that they have withdrawn from the arrangement, they're not party to this committee.
Thank you, Kelly. I did forget about that, so thank you for reminding me. I think I definitely would want, because I think what Ian's kind of set out here is that there's a clear problem in accessing the site that he mentioned. And if it's becoming a perennial problem, then I want something from County Council as how they're responding to it. Is it just that, so is there something there, because there is almost nothing that we as Amy, as JWS, as the four authorities have any power over? It's the County Council. So I would like it is kind of if they could provide if we can ask them to provide an official response to be included in the next meeting, just so explaining what they're doing and how they see the problem as well. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I think we can reach out and get them to do that. I think, there is always that distinction between the collection and disposal side of things. So the way that Amy will record things will be when they get to the access road, they will track how long it then takes them to get through the facility and back out. The way the county council record it is Weybridge to Weybridge. So they don't actually look at the waiting time ahead of going into the site. So there is a discrepancy between the two monitoring elements. That said, what the county council does try to do is keep the site as clear as possible between the hours of 10 and 2. So they try not to be loading bulkers or doing anything like that in the site, so that it enables the collection authorities to go in and dispose of their waste during that time. It can't always happen like that. If they get an influx of waste after a bank holiday weekend or, something, then they obviously need to clear the material out to be able to accept more material. So, sometimes it's not always perfect. I think also there's let's be honest, there's a little bit of a debate going on between JWS and Amy over the actual turnaround times. So within the contract, it refers to a 25-minute time. Now, we've always seen that as a 25-minute average, which means that it could go up to 50 minutes overall, whereas Amy see it as no more than 25 minutes. So there is a bit of discussion taking place over actually how long should it take for the vehicles to get through and out of the sites. And that's, all sites, that's not just the Leatherhead site. But where there does seem to be the issue is around the Leatherhead Mole Valley depot. So that's something that we're discussing with Ian and the team as a kind of live topic.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Kelly. That's good to know that there is some action on that, and I agree with Morgan that if we need to, we need quite a, we need to put this fairly strongly to Surrey County Council if it's an issue that they can help with. Ian, you wanted to come back on that?
Yeah, just to make it clear, once we are on site, in the site, there are no delays. I can, it's getting to the site. So, when this first raised its head and we were concerned about the delays, we were getting reports about there are no delays. That was the report that Suez were giving to county, because they measure it from Weybridge to Weybridge. So once we're on the Weybridge, it's, I think, mostly like the 20-25 minutes that Kelly has alluded to. It's the access road in that delays. Once the vehicle is in the access road, it's very difficult to get out of the access road. So once they're in the queue, they're in the queue. Yeah, that's the thing. So if they've got 4 or 5 bulkers in front of them, they're sitting behind them bulkers. So my resolution would be we move in front of them bulkers, but that isn't always the case.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah,
I think there's
what you're saying about we need an answer from county on this.
Yeah. It needs a sort of joint approach, doesn't it? A joint response. Jo.
Thank you. Sorry, momentarily forgot where the mute button was. Yeah, I think I just wanted to say as well. I think that chain of communication is working. We don't always get immediate responses because it does need to go. We need to go via Surrey and County Council, and they need to ask Suez the question. But we are generally getting some feedback, including sort of bulk loading times where they're relevant, and review of even footage of the queues by the site manager. During the next day generally. So I think the feedback's working. It doesn't always solve the problem in the moment, but we are still helping us to understand. And I think, Ian, I think it's fair to say that over the last few weeks and months, it's actually really not been the same level of concern. We're not having the same frequency that the depot team are reporting. I think it's picked up a little bit in the last week or so. We've had a couple of days where that's been mentioned at the end of day, that there's been some feedback from drivers at the end of the day that tipping times they felt were longer than normal. But in the sort of preceding weeks and probably couple of months, I think it's been less of an issue, which is why I think the most recent site user group meeting was quite a positive one, because you'd seen quite a bit of change. But I just want to emphasize that it has gotten better from where it was when Ian first sort of flagged this as a problem, but that just because it's gotten better doesn't mean we'll sort of drop it as a priority. We'll still continue to raise it anytime it's picked up with us.
Yeah, I can agree with that, Jo. Yeah. Since we first flagged it, and then that's why it's brought up in here. The main issue in December/January before was the tip. Yeah, and the communication has got a lot better, and has improved the service in terms of getting it done. There may be delays that don't affect the service at all. We can live with them. So yeah, agree.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. Okay, Ian, let's move on to the improvement plan.
Yeah, there's 2 improvement plans on the report, which you see. So obviously the 24-25 I inherited, and I can honestly say not a lot was done with it, because there was a lot of firefighting going on in my period of time last since I joined in August. So not a lot. So we've worked on what we did. It tells you at what stage I thought we were with it at the end of 25 in terms of March. So a new one is now in place, which is here, and this is what we're going to do. So the continued ongoing zero code, which is our health and safety, health surveillance is, we everything's booked in to get them all done. We've got a really robust system on welfare for the guys, in terms of that. Our route round risk assessments are progressing well at the moment, and I'm hoping that they will be completed by the end of this month. I've got a meeting with my health and safety team next week to confirm that. So that's really positive in terms of that. We've had some stand downs now, which JDRs are invited to, you guys are invited to, Mole Valley have done them. I think we've still got to book one at Elmbridge, which I think got cancelled for a reason. And there's a few things going on at Elmbridge at the moment, which should be concluded in the next few weeks, so we can get back to putting a more structured program in for Elmbridge. And I think there was one done at Woking as well. So I think one to be arranged at Surrey Heath at the moment. So we're working on them, and there have been really positive engagements with everybody. The JWS team have been to see what the crews do. You guys have as well. So that's been really positive. Garden waste is an ongoing thing. You'll notice I've put a few strike throughs on here as well, because it's been completed. And although you'll see there are stuff at 100%, and I haven't strike them through, because I feel they need to still be addressed, and they're an ongoing process. They'll always be there because we need to work on it consistently and constantly. So garden waste, Jo, I think you said earlier, there's 2 different processes. There's Elmbridge one, which I personally like. I think there should be a start and an end date at one point in the year, but that's just the way I've worked historically, and I like the way that works. The only thing I would add, if you are thinking of it in the future about your garden waste, is identifying the containers that actually have subscriptions when the guys are out on the road, instead of them having to use an in-cab, which is only the driver that sees it because everyone else is walking the road. Have something on the container that identifies the container as a live subscription for that particular year. That's just my personal preference in terms of that.
Yeah. Did you want to come in with a question?
I'll take the question. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. So, it's just I'm kind of how would that, it's just in your experience, Ian, how would that work? Kind of having something on, I assume it would have to be, if we did the Elmbridge method, the annual subscription. Yeah. That's the easy way to do it. In the other ones where they could, I guess,
difficult. Yeah, that's very difficult. No, I just wanted to. Yeah, that's the difficult side, because if you have a set point, I take from my experience before I joined here, I worked for Braintree District Council, and we went from a free garden waste service to a subscribed garden waste service at a set point. What they did was an early bird scheme as well. So I think it was £50 initially for the year. Annual subscription started on the 1st of April. If you subscribed before December the 31st of the, you got it for £25 for your first year. That was your early bird. So that encouraged people. Their uptake on their first year was over 65%. So really good uptake. What they did was a sticker, and the first year was a white sticker. Don't ask me why they chose white, easy to photocopy. But I would go down the most vivid colours you can think of, and you have a 5 or 6 year cycle on that colour. So red, green, blue, whatever colours you want to choose, and you just circulate, and it just has a year of the subscription on it. It works very well when you have that end of March, beginning of April. A bit more difficult with the flexibility of you can subscribe anytime. So yeah, that would be my personal opinion. And numbers, as Joe alluded to, have been quite consistent on registration. We've got another question.
Hi Ian, sorry to butt in, but on the garden waste first action there, your progress is 60%. What does that 60% represent? What are the actions been to get to that level?
So in the large volumes of renewals processed via the contact centre, it's just in that how many come through the contact centre, you know, the percentage that we're looking at that come through the contact centre in terms of that and how they're progressing them. As Joe alluded to, there was some issues last year. So we just need to look at how we drive more efficiencies into it as well. So that was just me personally thinking 60%. It may be higher.
I thought that represented the progress you had made on achieving the target. Yeah.
So that's what we've done so far, and it's an ongoing process. I could put 100% because it's always going to be ongoing, because we're always looking at how we can drive efficiencies into how we deal with stuff.
And what do those steps that you've taken, you know, just to expand it, what those steps?
I suppose steps we've taken is better communication between all the parties in terms of how we payment service. So, you know, do we look at a fully automated service? Do we look at a bit of a hybrid service? That's the sort of stuff we're looking at the moment. It's an ongoing process. I can't give you any details on because I don't have a lot of contact with the call centres. I just know that where they are, where it's how they're dealing with the calls that come in, processing payments and stuff like that. So that's the stuff that we've got at the moment.
Okay. Mark, a question?
Hi there, thank you. Obviously, we have an issue with the IT system, the administration of the garden waste service at the moment. I know we spoke previously, Ian, about you give us assurance that you're prioritising that. It doesn't seem to be on this table here. I just wondered if you're able to give an update just in terms of what has been done and when we expect that to be resolved. I think there's a manual work at the moment, but obviously it needs a IT solution to that, and also the fact that I think we originally flagged it in February. So just very keen to get the latest on that, if you're able to share.
At the moment, I can't update you, Mark, because we're still waiting on feedback from, I think Joe used to have had contact from one of our people in the IT side of it. So we're just waiting on that at the moment. We are pushing to get a date where we can get together and find out exactly what's gone on and give you guys an update on it as well. So I can't update you at the moment, Mark.
Can I just come back and just ask then, because obviously we've said that this is quite a priority for us as it links into our finances. When are you going to be able to give us that update? Because again, you said you'll treat this as a priority, which I do appreciate, but when do we get that update? It's time's ticking on for us.
Yeah, so I can't give you a date or a time on that because we're still waiting on response from one certain member. So I will chase again today, and I'll get my my lady that deals with white space and any issues like that. I'll get her to chase from her side as well. So as soon as I have an answer, I can let you know.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'll look forward to hearing from you on that. Yeah. Even if it's just to keep me informed that you've not got much to update, I'd still like to be in the loop on that, please.
Okay, yep, we can do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Ian.
Okay, right. So white space, and I will honestly say I don't think there's been a lot of movement on white space in the previous years. I personally don't like white space, but that's a personal opinion. I think there's better programs out there, but we are where we are with it, and we work to its capabilities. Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff going on white space early part of this year. So the streets at Mole Valley are now on white space, so they have routes, and that seems to be working well at the moment. So that's really positive, and we're going to look to do that at Surrey Heath as the next project as well, put their streets on white space as well. So it's and the reason we're doing it is because, you know, sickness, absence, somebody knows where they're going. If they're handed you know, it's their first day on it, they know that route. So that's the reason why we're doing that. I had a really interesting meeting. I was up in our Trafford site for the last couple of days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and a really interesting meeting around this sort of stuff in terms of white space. They use white space as well, but it's been brought up by a health and safety person that the use of the in-cab by the drivers is technically illegal because they're moving. And when they're using it a lot of the time, we know they shouldn't be, but a lot of the time they are. So we're looking at alternative ways of confirming properties being done, routes being done in a more timely fashion, and also not by the drivers. So there are devices out that loaders can carry on their wrists, and it could be a live confirmation stuff. So it's like a tablet that goes on the wrist, and they can, when, you know, they empty a bin or there isn't a bin out, they can do a live thing on there. So we're looking at alternatives at the moment in terms of white space and technology as well. So I'll keep you updated on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're stuck with white space now until the end of the contract. That's quite a few red flags on there, Ian. You know, have you got the resources you need to address those red flags?
Interesting question, Councillor Tilling. Interesting question. I don't think I have within Amy at the moment. So
is there any effort being made then to get the resources you need?
I've got an extra body at the moment which is working on some white space stuff, but I've had to move stuff around to do that. So we are working on it. It's not the priority of it at the moment because there's other things going on with route optimization as well. So yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Joe, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, it's just really on that point about the in-cabs and the sort of flagging of it as a sort of safety thing. I think it's an interesting one, and I'm really happy to have continue that conversation in other discussions, because in-cab uses is pretty standard across the waste industry. So I just wonder I suppose it'd be useful at some point to understand what the different view is. I absolutely appreciate that if the loaders can have access to it, that's actually quite an improvement generally, because as you said earlier, that they've got the information to hand. There's not that sort of effort to communicate between operative and driver if it's a waste round. But just accept that you've made that point, that there's been that bit of feedback, but be interesting to have a further discussion on it to understand, because that's obviously not the view collectively across the industry as such, because it is used in not just waste vehicles, but Amazon delivery drivers, DPD, they're all using sort of map-based devices to manage their routes.
Yeah, I mean, it's Yeah, it's just, it should be, I think even the Amazon drivers, they shouldn't be driving along, and it's like using a mobile phone, isn't it? It's illegal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I assume that the idea is they're supposed to be looked at when the vehicle has stopped. So you're then, logging the data or looking at the next,
Yeah,
the
and I
next
think
thing.
I think the issue you have there is, and like Joe alluded to, you've got your loaders shouting numbers at drivers. So 35 hasn't put their bin out.
Mm.
At the end of a very long street, how do you remember all them numbers when you're meant to be doing it? I appreciate why they do it, but if I was standing in front of the traffic commissioner because something had happened, and the driver says, "Oh, I was doing my in-cab, but I'm not, I caused an accident," that there's prosecution there.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, I think that's certainly a topic for debate between yourself and JWS.
Yep.
And we'll go to Rosemary for a question.
Thank you, Ashley. Yes, it's on white space problems. I think there was an outage a couple of weeks ago that caused problems with our garden waste, which did cause a spike in people contacting the customer services unit. And that's that's a real difficulty. The other thing which is on your table is setting up the litter bins. Now, I know this has been talked about for, I'd say, a year, and we were very much hoping when our new bins went out at the beginning of this year that it could be integrated into this system, and that we'd have stickers with QR codes on every bin. And it's very disappointing that nothing's happening on this. So please, please use this as, to help you push on greater resource on white space, because we really could do with seeing some improvement at this stage in the contract.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think the issue I have with white space is everything we ask them to do is at a cost. So and it's not a cheap system. I know of other systems out there that I've used previous that the basic package you buy would do what white space is doing and much more. So yeah, that's just something for you guys to think about in the future.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So operations, a lot of ongoing stuff in operations, route optimization at Surrey Heath Woking, and that would include cross boundary stuff. It looks like we haven't done a lot. We've had meetings. Joe's been involved in meetings. We've had meetings with Surrey County. I think we've got one next week as well, which is an update. We are waiting on a response from Surrey, so we're ready to virtually go now. The person that I've moved into, the person that was doing it, that had a lot of the data, and it was set to go, I want to say October last year, Joe, realistically, was virtually set to go, and he went off sick, and we got no information from him. He's left the business now and handed nothing over to us. So I've had to put someone else in position, which I've taken from internally within the JWS contract. We've managed to get information elsewhere. Routing's almost done. We're ready to go. We're just waiting on whether we can from Surrey County now. So, Joe, you got a question?
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment because I can feel Woking's ears pricking up on the screen and at that. Just to say, yeah, I mean, Ian is describing how far they've got, but to date, like, we've not had any data to review or any indication of what the impact of those changes are, whether it's patterns, days, just rounds, etc. So whilst Ian might be feeling that they've got a long way with it, we're still very early days from our point of view in that process of reviewing the proposals or receiving the proposals, reviewing them, talking about what the comms impact is, coming to you to explain it. I'm not in a position to do that, so I just wanted to clarify that it's not running away without us keeping you informed. Yeah. I don't know what the proposal is at the moment, other than it involves tipping elsewhere, and those are the conversations. But we've got a meeting with Jodie next week, I think, Ian. So
yeah, Tuesday, Joe. Yeah.
Hopefully that will give Ian the answers he needs to then bring that proposal to us.
Yeah, that's all I'm waiting for. I'm waiting on an answer from County to say whether we can, with what they've agreed in terms of where the waste can go and who's going to do it. So that's very good. No movement on KPI 3 or 4 or 5 at the moment, but I haven't planned to do anything in this quarter. It's next quarter I plan to work on that. So the next meeting there'll be an update on that as well. Fleet and maintenance, really good position at the moment. The fleet is in a much better position than where it was when I first came in, and that is testament to my transport managers that were put in place at the same time as I came in. They've worked really hard to get the fleet up to a standard where it wasn't. So we have a good program in place for maintenance now. We still have vehicles off the road, VORs, but it's minimal. We can manage with the levels we're at the moment. And we've got some good contractors that we can rely on to, if we know there's a long-term vehicle going to be off the road, we can get a hire vehicle in fairly quickly to accommodate that. So I'm pleased with how that is done at the moment. Not much to report on that, and that is it from me. Happy to take any more questions.
Good, thanks for that, Ian. We've had lots of questions as we've gone through that. Are there any final points anybody wants to make? I can't see any hands up. No, good. Well, thanks, Ian. That's been very thorough. With one or two expected actions next time we meet for you to report on. Good. Thanks very much. So the next item is item 7, which is the work programme for 24-25 and the end of year report. Is that you, Nick?
That's me this time, just to confuse you, Ashley.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. Thanks, Joe.
As usual, I will throw in that Nick does a huge amount of work to bring this report together across all the different parts of JWS. So thanks to him as normal. So yes, you have a report in the agenda pack which gives an end of year summary on the 24-25 joint contract work programme, which was delivered by JWS for Elmbridge, Mole Valley, Surrey Heath and Woking. To summarise it briefly, that was the programme that was approved by the committee in March 2024, and it focused on 8 objectives, which covered areas from operational efficiency, resident engagement, planning. In March 2024, we'd included a new objective for the year, which was introduced to review the long-term service delivery options after the AMI contract ends in 2027. So despite various challenges, including the decision by Surrey County Council to exit the Inter-Authority Agreement and take back the set responsibilities that JWS was responsible for from 1st of April 2025, we made strong progress across 4 key areas. So in terms of service and infrastructure improvements, we worked with MVDC to integrate their bulky and garden waste forms with Whitespace so that those requests go through in an automated way to Whitespace for AMI to action. We reviewed the non-domestic collections in 3 of the 4 areas and provided updates to AMI so that they could make sure that Whitespace reflected those and were adjusted accordingly. We've installed dual litter and recycling bins across Elmbridge, Mole Valley and Surrey Heath. Began trials of food waste housing units at flats in Mole Valley and Woking, and supported the setup of services at a range of new housing sites across the joint contract area. In terms of contracts, strategy and policy, we secured a new textiles contract for the material collected at the curbside and in bring banks, and we rejoined the WE compliance scheme to dispose of the electricals collected at the curbside. We've completed a strategic options appraisal for the joint contract and engaged with DEFRA on funding for food waste and EPR, as well as preparing for the simpler recycling regulations. On recycling and street scene, we expanded small weed collections and trialling a range of different measures that were externally funded. We've carried out a review of bring banks to pull together suggestions moving forward to increase capture and grow income, and that report will be brought forward shortly to the authorities. We've carried out a number of actions to look at how we can reverse what was Waking's declining recycling rate performance, and also delivered a chewing gum removal and awareness project in 3 areas again, because we secured external funding for that. In terms of public engagement and behaviour change, we ran year-round communications using digital platforms to engage our residents. We've amplified the Surrey-wide Own Your Impact campaign, trialled targeted food waste and contamination messaging in Woking and Surrey Heath respectively, and we grew participation in the Rethink Waste scheme to over 7,000 households across the joint contract area. So Annex 1 of the report has a breakdown of the end of year status for all the activities that were in our work programme. And in terms of next steps, anything that was outstanding or delayed will be rolling forward into the 25-26 programme, and we're already underway on delivering elements of that. And we'll be bringing a full update on progress so far to the September cycle of meetings. As always, happy to take any questions, but otherwise we're just asking members to note the progress and achievements that were carried out in 24-25.
Yeah, just a quick question on the Rethink Waste. That was an SEP sponsored scheme, wasn't it? Are they continuing to fund that scheme?
I'm going to look to Nick because I think you might know the latest on potentially.
Yeah, no problem. So yes, you're right, Councillor Tilling. It is a SEP funded scheme. It's due to come to an end on the 30th of June, so next week. I understand that they have been in, so Surrey County Council obviously have now taken responsibility, as Joe said, because they took back the SEP functions from the 1st of April. I understand they have been in contact with Green Redeem, the provider, about extending the scheme, but they want to broaden it a bit, so not just focus on residual sort of waste messaging, but also look at the sort of whole sort of climate change agenda. And maybe there might be an option to perhaps link it to something else that they've got established within the county council that looks more widely at sort of environmental sustainability sort of topics. So in terms of the work programme for SEP, we're due to actually get a draft of that next week. So that will be our first indication as to really what Rethink Waste might look like for the remainder of this year. So once we have that, I believe there'll be sort of sessions planned with members to sort of update them on what the programme will be, obviously led by Surrey County Council as the new delivery team. So in summary, understand they're looking at it, trying to extend it, broaden the scope, and we should find out a bit more next week, hopefully.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Nick. Now, it's interesting that for the last 6 months, we haven't had an SEP meeting, given the sort of turmoil of setting up new staff. So presumably we will, we used to have one every quarter. So presumably we will go back to having SEP meetings over the coming 6 months.
I will leave that to Surrey County Council in terms of their communications out to officers and members to inform them how they're planning to sort of run the governance moving forward. So unfortunately, we're not sort of party directly to that information anymore. So I'd have to refer to them for an answer.
Yeah. No, fair enough. It was just an observation, really.
That is noted. I agree. Yes, obviously we haven't had a sort of a wider collective meeting, which has been a shame. But obviously we've seen what's happened. Obviously with the transfer, obviously sort of taking priority, and obviously the staff being embedded into the new authority.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Any other comments from anybody on that work programme update? No. Okay. Thanks very much. Right, I think that's pretty much it for the public part of the meeting. We now need to go on to look at the budget, which is an exempt session. So I think probably Ian will just say thank you and goodbye to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your presentation.
No problem. Thank you. Cheers all. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I've got now agenda item 8, exclusion of public and press. The committee has advised to resolve that under Regulation 4 of the local authorities, executive agreements, meetings and access to information (England Regulations 2012), the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the ground that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Part 1 of the Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act as set out below. Right, is that sufficient then, Jenny, to stop recording and to move to the exempt part of the meeting?
Yeah, I'll stop the recording now. So this is the end of the public part of the meeting.